Welcome to the Tom Style Show. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Today, we're super excited. This is insane. I'm just, I met Sushir Kadidal. He's the founder of Ohms. This is the meditation app, and this is true story. I was never, ever into meditation. Then I heard, but I'm a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld, the Seinfeld show, and I heard Seinfeld, no matter what, he does meditation every day.
I didn't know that.
I was like, okay, if Jerry Seinfeld says, he stands in the middle of the road for every day for 10 minutes, I will go and do that. Forget whatever it is. So I was like, okay, I got to get into it. And after that, I started building my respect for this. And Ohms, the founder is Sushir, he created the scientific and the architectural and the design, everything combined into this app with the meditation vibe, and oh my God, this is gonna take off. So before I talk too much, let's get to Sushir. Sushir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Really excited to have you. Now, Sushir, what is this Ohm?
So Ohms is primarily a breathwork app, but we really are focused on meditation as an overall practice. Primarily, we focus on breathwork because, just like you, we were all meditation and breathwork skeptics for the longest time. I grew up with my parents telling me to meditate and do breathwork. I grew up with asthma. You never listen to your parents when you're growing up, so it's quite.
Yeah.
So you come back to it, and my last we can jump around, but my last job before I did this, I was an architect, and the hours can be kind of long and challenging as an architect. And an interior designer, so a fair amount of anxiety in the practice, and just like being able to sustain a long-term career. So one of the things that I think we recognize is I recognize this personally is how you need a way to manage this, and you think about all the opportunities, and you look at meditation, and you're like, I tried meditation before, but for a long time I didn't understand it, so I didn't know how it affected me. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know if I was doing it right. I didn't know if it was actually having an impact, because doing things that are kind to yourself are quite hard if you don't see immediate impact. Right? So a big part of what we're doing, and we ended up here kind of incidentally, and we can talk about this in more depth, but we ended up here not because we planned. We found something that made sense to us as a team, and I think it's primarily the team is a big part of this. So we found meditation through the science. We're like, how does this work? Wow. We spent some time really looking at the science, looking at what meditation does, breathwork does, what are the effects of it, how can it be validated. Yeah. Once you understand the mechanism of it, it's quite simple. And once you understand that, and you're like, oh, I know how to do this. I know why I'm doing this. It doesn't have to be a long-term practice. It can be quite, done quite quickly, like in a couple of minutes, I can see an effect. So the moment we start doing that, we're like, oh, this is interesting. So now I'm like, I do this all the time, because how do I'm trying to figure out how to succinctly explain that transition between a skeptic to this. Is just once you understand, it becomes easier to embrace it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. So this is wow. So you brought science into it. It's not just meditation. So there's a scientific factor.
Yeah. I mean, the other part of this is that it really started as a group of 4 of us. So it's me and 2 and primarily a long-term friend of mine. So Bobak, who's a professor at Cornell. Oh, wow. So he and his lab partner, when they were doing their postdoc, they were working on breath technology. So they primarily work in medical interventions. Yeah. So they were developing a piece of technology that really was, quite sensitive to change in atmospheric moisture, and through that it detected breath. So the whole reason we started working on this is they thought there was an opportunity here to take that and make it a product. So we started dabbling with this years ago. We were like, oh, this could be interesting. They're scientists, I'm a product designer and architect, let's do something together. So we started working sort of ad hoc, impromptu, on the weekends, just let's see if we can do something. Eventually, it kind of all came together, and we're like, we can actually do something here. This is kind of interesting. There's an opportunity here. So we dabbled with lots of things. We looked at clinical interventions. We looked at sleep apnea. We looked at respiratory muscle training, post surgery. We looked at a number of things, how to take this idea of science and breath and bring it to the world. Eventually, the idea that made sense not just for the technology but also for us was breathwork and meditation, primarily because we saw that the science can really inform how to make a meaningful impact in your daily life. So that that connection for us as like me as a creative and them as scientists, that relationship really worked really well within the wellness space. So it's primarily the two scientists, me and our fourth partner, Brian, who started this like a couple of years ago. And then we have a fifth partner who's actually in tech. Somebody who's actually in tech. It's helpful to have someone in tech in the tech industry. So we started there. So it's really a relationship between the creative and science. It's always like driving everything we do.
Okay. So, Sushir, let's figure out what is breath work. So, how does I'm breathing all the time, but now if you say it's a work or there is a scientific explanation, I'm like, wait a second, let me stop breathing. Okay. So, what is that, and how does that work?
So breathwork is, it's just any controlled breathing is breathwork. So when you're exercising, like, when you're doing reps, when you're rowing, when you're climbing, when you're doing anything that's physical, you're always doing breathwork because the general advice is, inhale while you're straining, exhale while you're releasing, things like that. So it's any controlled breathwork. So we're employing it in many ways, but the way we employ it in mindfulness or in meditation or for mental health is that, so breathwork is focused on controlling your breath. It's basically giving your mind something to focus on. So you're really focused on your breath. So that's the first step. So whatever your anxiety is, you're trying to distract from it by essentially focusing on an activity. So that helps the mind distract. But that's the I would say like the most superficial aspect. The other is that breath is the only autonomous system we have control over. So breath, heart rate. So you can't control other parts, but you can control your breath. And the mind-body connection is quite well established now, where in the sense that your breath rate is directly connected to your heart rate. So the slower you breathe, the slower your heart rate goes. The faster you breathe, the faster your heart rate goes. That's directly connected to our nervous system. So there's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So what happens when we get stressed is the sympathetic system fires. It's like, okay, I'm in a stress situation, your pupils dilate, your muscles contract, your digestion stops, and you're essentially thinking, I'm in a dangerous situation, I need to do something about it. So that's what anxiety does to us. Essentially, it just heightens all these senses. That immediately raises your heart rate, and that raises your breath rate to control, and they're all a connected system. So what we do is, if we can control your breath rate, we can suppress your heart rate, which will trigger your parasympathetic system, which is your rest and digest system. So that immediately connects to your brain, and your brain's like, oh, if I'm breathing slowly, my heart rate is slow, anxious situation is gone. So we can reduce essentially your anxiety response. So breath work is using your breath to be able to control your other uncontrollable systems. So that's what we find, and so we've done a fair amount of research on this. We delved into it, and we see how it works. We see how it works on ourselves.
Wow. Okay. Wow. This is incredible because when I was doing weight training, and I wasn't breathing. I was like, okay, And my trainer, whoa, it's not gonna work. Breathe. That's the most important. I was like, what has breathing to do with the lifting? And now that you explained it, you explained with the scientific side of it, and also you can kind of even try it out yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Breathe faster, your heart rate goes up. Breathe slower, goes down. So you see it right there. So now that we kind of understand, okay, the breath work, and you're kind of trying to get that into the tech. So how does the app and the your watch and all that, how does that come into picture?
Okay, so one of the things I think that's hardest for a lot of us, and I'll talk for myself, and you really think about the most empathetic to yourself. So with meditation, one of the hardest things for me was you're supposed to do a thing for a period of time, and you're not sure what happened, right? Clearly meditation is meaningful, it has a lot of effects, but just that adoption level is quite hard to be if it doesn't have an effect, if I can't see it directly, how do I keep committing to it? Right? It's again, anything with fitness, if you're gonna say, I'm gonna start running, the first day is hard, the second day is hard, third day is, really when it gets better is weeks from now. And meditation is very similar to that, to a lot of us, where it takes time before it becomes natural. So for us, the heart rate and heart rate variable specifically are the two metrics that are really scientifically connected to your mental state. So if you're, like I said, if you can lower your heart rate, your anxiety will subside. So for us, being able to track effect was quite important. So that's one step. It's just hey, I did something, did it have an effect on me? So with the app, you do a meditation session or breathwork session, and you can see your heart rate. So we show you a graph. We'll show you where you started. We'll show you where you ended. Did it have an effect on you? And ideally, in the long run, what we're working towards is building an intelligent system that understands which types of session work for you and what durations of them work for you, and essentially being able to say, okay, this is where your heart rate started at, here's how we can get you down to a manageable heart rate. So that's why heart rate is quite important to us. It's just one, as a metric to be able to understand if it works, and two, if we can manage your heart rate through the session, we can change the session to be able to respond to your heart rate. Is your heart rate going in the right direction? Yes, no. If it's not going in the right direction, there's a number of things we can do. We can be like, hey, this isn't working right now, let's take a break. Or we can change your breath rate to be able to try and get you there. So we can actually engage with you. We can, in the session, we can be like, is this working? Yes, no. If it is, how do we make it better? If it's not, how do we make it better?
So you're like a personalized trainer / doctor right on my phone.
Ideally, that's it. Like, we recognize that nothing beats like another person who can guide you like an expert, but most of us don't have access to somebody who can be there with us all the time to guide us. So this is the next best thing, is how we view it, to a personal meditation coach, somebody who's like watching your vitals and your statistics through a session and making recommendations in real time. So for us, that's it. This is the proxy for that.
Wow, but this is incredible. No, Sushir, the thing is, what I'm trying to figure out, all your life, you were an architect. I have seen some of your work. I'm like, wow, he has eye for the unbelievable architectural work. I love architecture, by the way.
You.
And you worked with the Las Vegas Sands company, the Sands company. Anything you see in Las Vegas back in the days used to be built by them. and so you have this architectural mindset, the background, the design. How about the transition from that to the breath work, the meditation? These are more abstract stuff, right?
Correct.
So the thinking, but maybe you can say the architectural, that's also abstract and all that. You can bring the philosophy in it. But how does that work? I'm like, how did that happen?
So I guess that is an interesting shift. So I wasn't intending for our experiences to be, and if you use the app, our experiences are quite like visual and like architecturally, like they're three-dimensional. So a lot of what we do is, as architects, we're just dealing with space, right? So right now, for what I have, it's the real estate of the screen. How do I bring depth into it? And how do I make it visually rich so that when you're doing a session, I'm giving you as many opportunities to step away from the thing that's making you anxious. Where focusing on your breath first, then we're saying, okay, not only you're focused on your breath, you're focused on something that's happening on the screen. You're focused on the rich visuals, you're focused on like the details there, you're focused on the sound, you're focused on like haptics. So it's essentially, architecture is sensorial, right? You're really looking at light, space, how do you feel in something? So this is just a proxy for that experience. It's like, how do I take your mind and give you as many calming things as possible? So that transition, I think, was somewhat natural, even though it was unintended.
Wow, because that brings up this question that back in the days there was no UX design. That did not exist. Right. You give an idea to the developer, and the developer puts it together, and then sometimes you do some CSS work a little bit. Right. So now these apps are the biggest piece of real estate on the planet. It's not the Times Square, it's the TikTok, and how it interacts with you, with your mind, and how it interacts with one person is similar. It's interacting with billions of people, right, at the same time. And that kind of, this goes into, and from the architectural point of view, what do you think? Do you think it's more challenging, or you think both the sides has its own pros and cons? But
I mean, honestly, like as architects, you spend so much time in the digital space anyway. Just because like I said, it takes years before you see something built, right? So you spend so much of that time in the digital space. On the one hand, it's great to then walk into that physical space and know you were a part of this. There is a joy and there's a elation from being able to walk into something like, I was a part of this, I built this, like I envisioned this, that's great. On the flip side, when you've worked on something for a number of years, most of the things, and this may just be personal, but most of the times you walk into space, all you see are its flaws, right? Because you've invested so much time, and all you see are the errors, because you're like, I could have made all of this better. The nice thing about the digital real estate is that I can always make it better. And I can explore like ideas on as frequent of a basis as I want to. Somebody else can experience that and tell me whether that meant something to them. And then I can respond to that. I'm like, that didn't work for you? Let's try something else. With architecture, you have one shot, you build a building, that's it. There's no going back and making changes. So this idea of constant iteration, constantly making it better, speaking to people over time, evolving with them, I think is very exciting for me personally as an architect.
Wow, that's you made it more interesting. I think you should be the pioneering UX. You made it like I was thinking he's gonna probably say, yeah, that's that, and this is digital. But wow, you have very different angle to things. Now, the breathwork, right, with the app, so I can kind of visualize it.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm taking your word for it. I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that. Any other way are you getting into that space, like just the breath work, or you have other things in pipeline?
So what we've built so far is like the foundation of what we're doing, because we know breath work is where it starts. Because breath work is the thing that's measurable. I can see if I've had an effect on you, and I can make choices for that effect over the course of the session. So that's the foundation of what we're building. We recognize it has to grow beyond that. So a lot of what we're building now is really the how do you make this more holistic? So I can see quantitative data now. I can be like, okay, my heart rate was 72, I got you to 61. Great, I've made a change. You feel better, great. How do you reconcile that with the qualitative sense you have of your day? So we're expanding into journaling, just to make sure, okay, this is what my day felt like, here are the sessions I did, here's the heart rate data points from them. You can essentially look at yourself as a quantitative and a qualitative self, and we can give you a bigger picture of that. We're expanding into screening, so there's really great, really simple screening tests that are out there that are validated, that are just like, where do you sit on an anxiety scale? Because a large part of anxiety and that's challenging is like, my anxiety level 10 may be very different from your anxiety level 10. So how do we normalize this across populations to make sure that we're trying to have the best effect in what we're doing? So we're looking at implementing a screening system that's just like, for you, how do I gauge where you are? How do I normalize you in a population so that I can understand how to affect you as an individual and where you sit within that population? So we're expanding into kind of those larger ideas that we are going into screening, journaling. Broader meditation is something that we'll expand into. But the thing that we're mostly investing in as a team is kind of the intelligence that underlies, is for it to be responsive. That's the thing we're building most of. Like, how do we take the science that we know exists, validate it? How do we integrate intelligent systems where the sessions are responding to you in the moment, but also over as a practice? What you need in this moment may not be what you need in 7 weeks. You're evolving. So giving you the same session in the same method may not be effective for you because you've grown. Maybe it's gotten better, maybe it's gotten worse. So that notion of being able to look at you as a person that's who you are now and who you are over time, and the app responds on both scales, I think is quite interesting to us. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, because that's one thing I was thinking about. When I was in college, I thought I was very stressed. But now, looking back, I was like, that was the best time of my life. What?
Exactly.
So forget stress. So, a person, but my ability to deal with stress is different.
Correct. Yeah.
The timeline I have to deal with it is also different, right? The resources that I can deploy to take care of the stress, that's different, right? I didn't have that 10 years ago, right? So so you are kind of visualizing the journaling part of it, that what it was, what you can take today, and how we can improve. So you are basically deploying a significant amount of AI into your, but this is not the Chat GPT version. This is not the language model, but you are the graphical model of it, right?
We're really looking at data analysis. Like how do we make sense of qualitative and quantitative data to be able to give you a practice that's meaningful throughout, essentially, and a lot of it requires a fair amount of work on our end, so which is why we're cautious about releasing anything yet. But we feel we're pretty good, pretty close to being able to put stuff out there that we can stand behind. But that's what we're working on.
So what's the status now? Can I go and download the app and start using from today, or I gotta wait? What's the situation?
So the app is out. You're talking to us very, very fresh. Like we worked on this for a long time, but we put out like a launch in December. We weren't like looking to do a big launch. Mostly we're making sure we have a stable product and it's useful to people. First thing we wanted to do is put it out, start talking to people who are most engaged, making sure that the things that we think work for us work for other people. People are enjoying it. So we've done that. So you can download the app. There's the 4 core sessions. You can connect it to your Apple Watch if you have one, and you can see the data for yourself. You can see the data right after a session, and over time. We show you over the course of the weeks how your data has changed. You can do that right now. What we're looking for in the next, I won't put a date to it, but in the near future is to deploy the intelligence, to be able to say, okay, now this session is actually responding to you in the moment, they're responding to you over time. So that's what we're working on next.
Okay, so the intelligence part, pretty much everybody nowadays is going into the intelligence part, right? So this is an exciting time for that.
It's quite exciting. And also, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, I mean, for me, the biggest challenge is repetition of something, even if it's good for me, is quite hard because doing the same thing for the 20th time, I'm like, okay, I've done this before. So how do I make sure that it's consistently new to me? How do I make sure the sessions are responding? So that, I think, is for longevity of this. And this is really a longevity solution. You're not going to change your mental health in a day or a week or 2 weeks. It's something that you get better at, and you get better at managing. And to your point, you have more resources, you have more tools to deploy to manage them. And this is what we think this is. Like, it's one of those tools. It's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all your problems, but it's one tool in your arsenal to deal with this. So how do we keep this with you?
Yeah, this is you're touching into a lot of different areas also, from health, wellness to the mental health aspect of it. Right. So there, I think we had Karen, Andreas, Stefan, that was another mental health app. They were analyzing voice and things like that, right? And
great science there too.
Yeah. So and you have the Breathwork, which is I'm like, wow, that's interesting. That's something. So now, okay. The other thing I was thinking about, you have worked for many years. You were a professor.
I was.
I saw you on Rate My Professor, and your students rated you very well.
Oh my God, I have not looked at that in a long time.
I was like, okay, wow, that's pretty good. So they loved you. Did you teach SolidWorks?
It was a part of one of the things that I used to teach, yeah.
Oh, wow. But, I took SolidWorks classes because it was part of the aerospace program. I took a couple of those classes. I wasn't that good at it, but many years ago. But in architecture, do you teach SolidWorks?
No, I did my graduate degree in industrial design. So I'm a product designer as well, which is so for me, design on both scales is kind of interesting. So I used to teach in the industrial design department at Pratt.
Wow, so you are all over design, whatever is it, digital, industrial, architectural.
You should probably focus on something at some point.
This is fantastic. So now, as a professor, you have the students, you have the audience. When you're working, you have your coworkers, things like that in large companies. Now transitioning to entrepreneurship, where very few people working together very intensely on a product that you don't know how successful it would be, things like that. There's some anxiety part of it. How are you coping with it? And, what's your experience like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is clearly, obviously personal, but that was an interesting and difficult challenge, I would say. My last job, I was surrounded by extremely talented people, large groups of them, and we were responsible for lots of things. You built an identity around that. You worked on these projects with these group of people that you believed in. And then stepping away from that and then just kind of being in your own mental space for a while to figure out how you're going to build something new was hard. There was a bit of a loss of identity for me in being able to say, okay, I no longer exist within a structure, I have to make my own now. The upside is I work with incredible people now as well. So I have 4 partners, all incredibly talented and motivated and dedicated, and we work together on kind of a daily basis. So there's me, there's Bobby, who's the scientist at Cornell. There's Alar, who's also a scientist, he's out in Portugal. There's a good friend of mine from elementary school, Brian, that we stayed in touch. He's a creative, he works in storyboarding, branding, that kind of world. And then there's Harry, who's from the tech world. So there's 5 of us who are, and Harry is great at what he does, and he came out of Amazon and he came out of DoorDash, so he has a strong product experience that the rest of us don't have. So this kind of very diverse group of creative scientists and engineers, being able to do that on a daily basis, eventually, it took a while from just me, my mental space, to figure out how to make that shift and build a structure. But now that we have it, this team is so it's great to be able to get up and work on something that you believe in, that it is abstract. That's the other hard part, right? Last time when I was an architect, you had a client. You could be like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. What do you think? And you had this reciprocal conversation about where it was going to go. Now you don't know. You work on something for 2 years. You don't know how people are going to feel about it. You don't have any direct connection until you put it out there. There's a lot of anxiety around that. There's a lot of fair amount of stress about am I doing the right thing? Are people going to enjoy this? Are we building what makes sense for other people, not just us? So there's a lot of that, but it's easy. or easier when you have a group of people who are smart, talented, and you can like bounce ideas off of, and they're just as committed as you, and you're all like trying to figure this thing out. Like, and so it's been great. Like, there's nothing else I would rather be doing now. It's definitely not always that way.
Wow, this is amazing. And also, if you're stressed, you have the you have
Exactly.
the app to take
We have
care
a natural system built in.
because anything, the best products are the ones that you come up with out of your own, to solve your own problem first,
yes.
right? Instead of solving for everybody else,
Yeah.
right? So, and this is, there is not a single person on earth that's going to say, oh, I don't need that. I'm fully mentally, completely, I do not have any stress. I'm totally good. So you know, this impacts so many things. Now, in terms of, now the other thing is, you know, the startup ecosystem was super strong, and now it's still strong, but it's a little bumpy, right? So as any other ecosystem, not just the startup, because any company or whatever, they're all cost cutting, things like that. So does it make it a little more challenging during this time to you know, continue the vision in a longer term, or you're thinking, okay, so maybe we had plans that would be executing in 3 years, but now we shorten the plan, or, you know, come up with something simpler and do it in 6 months?
There is a drive to be a little bit quicker about things, without a doubt. So for a while, we didn't want to worry about anything. We kind of set up our lives that we could iterate on ideas. So we and sometimes I think you wonder how people are going to perceive this, but we really spent. I was working on this for a little bit more than 2.5 years. On this, just full-time, unemployed, just like working this out. To find an idea, like, does this make sense? Like, how do we want to build this? Like, we wanted to take the time, because we're all making a transition. One, we're not in tech, so it's not like we built a company, we're just building another one. Mental shift from scientists and creatives to be able to, okay, now we're in this new space, we have to learn it, we have to figure it out. What are we going to build? Is that thing meaningful to us? Is it meaningful to other people? Like, you have to find this Venn diagram of all these things. So it takes time. So until now, we were like, let's not worry about anything. Let's build a thing that makes sense. It'll take as long as it takes. Now we think we have something we believe in, we believe can have an impact. We're here, and the thing we recognize is to be able to do something with it, and to scale, you have to iterate quite quickly. You have to get feedback loops with users quite quickly. You have to be able to pivot quite quickly. So to be able to do all that, now we recognize we actually have to be a little bit more hungry about funding and financing and all of those things. So the nature of where we are is, like, to your point, like, it's a bit more of an unstable circumstance than previously was. But I do sense that things are still making it out of the gate. We're not immediately shut at the door every time we talk to somebody. There's still a lot of positivity and openness. I mean, sure, there's more caution about things. Not necessarily a bad thing for a startup to be facing caution. You want your idea to be validated and tested. You want as many people to believe in it. So there's a lot of that, but there is a sense like we need to move a little quicker. We need to like accelerate. We need to like get to a good fit sooner than we otherwise would have wanted to. So
there's this thing, you know, the creatives sometimes come up with such creative ideas in a poetic fashion, and the tech guy looks at it, and the guy is like, oh, you know, this is, we can probably use this. This happened to me back in college, and that wasn't the startup time that, you know, many years ago, and I had a lot of creative friends. And they were super nice to me. I was the tech guy, and I'm bad at tech, a bad tech person. And they used to give me some unbelievable ideas, and I was sold. Executing those was hard. I failed at so many of those that they gave up. They were like, oh, their life just disappeared, I think. I don't know what happened to them, but I hope they're doing well. Oh, man. But you know, this happened. And some of those ideas, they turned out to be very big ideas down the road. Other people did it, just not us.
Every day.
And you know, this is so. Do you think, like, so the question I was coming to is, a lot of people say, oh, we got a bunch of tech guys, and I meet sometimes startups, they're a bunch of tech guys, or all of them are tech guys, and some marketing, etc. No creative in there, because tech guys don't think that way. You know, they're not thinking, oh, I need a creative to think differently. in your company, that is so exciting to me because a couple of you are creatives,
Right, yeah.
and then you have the scientific side of it, and then you have the tech,
Yeah.
right? And do you recommend having a creative in every startup? Is that your recommendation?
Blanket statements are hard, but I do think blanket statements are hard. But I do think that there's a fair amount of value, especially in a situation like we're in now, where there's a lot of competition. It's very hard to find a space without competition. It's very hard to find a space without noise. So to be able to, I think, really empathetically reach users, I do think you need a creative side to it. But also, I mean, I think on the flip side, I have a lot of friends in San Francisco who are deep in tech, but they just have the most incredible creative sense as well. So I do think that there's a balance between those two things, and it's important to have that balance.
Okay.
And I think that balance shifts based on the industry you're in, but I think there's value definitely in it.
Yeah. Wow. This is so interesting. Now, Sushir. So, what you're going to be doing in the next? What are the things you want to accomplish with Ohms? With your personal journey with Ohms, what's the plan in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years?
Oh, okay. 2 to 5 years. We're usually thinking so short, like so quickly, like what are we building next? But clearly we have things on the horizon. We do think that we want to take Ohms and grow it into into a tool that is all-encompassing, that it is holistic, that it's not just data, but that data is always presented in sort of a qualitative, empathetic way. But so that's across spectrums, right? So we want to make sure that we're immersing you as much as possible. So this notion that we always kick around with and we're trying to keep on our horizon is how do we make that space, that digital real estate of your screen, as immersive as possible. Yeah. This thought that Apple is putting out their new AR system is super exciting. Yeah. VR, AR has had its rocky start in the last couple of years. We know the challenges with really developing a system that's going to have wide adoption. But we do think that there's a space that we can really tap into that market of being able to take you and put you in space. And it works for me because I'm an architect. I'm build a space, put you in space, put you in experience, try and get you out of your whatever's anxious, whatever that day might look like. Try and build a space for you that's a sanctuary of some sort, so being able to expand that. So who knows how far that will go, but this idea that we are integrating the latest technology into this and keeping this on the bleeding edge of science, I think is our biggest vision for this, that we're never resting on something that we've built. So what is next and how we iterate on that will, I think, constantly evolve, just like, if we had said ChatGPT was going to change everything in the course of a year 12 months ago, I mean, how would you have known, right? So it's quite hard at this point. I think we're in a very interesting time where change is quite quicker than we've ever had it. So I think it's quite hard to understand where we'll be in a year, but we know that we're focused on new emerging technologies, new emerging science, and how it implements into what we do.
Yeah, because that brings up a very good point. The AR, VR, the VR world. Yeah. That's a full design that you can put yourself. Yeah. Where you are an architect and you are the architect. Right. It's an exciting place, and if you can bring the meditation there. Now in the breath work, that's the start, and you're going into a holistic approach. Yeah. Now, are you going to be other than meditation? Are you going to go into more other mental health issues, different types of areas of mental health?
So we always rest back on the research. So the research primarily shows that digital mental health interventions are most effective. So if you look at the spectrum of anxiety, there's no anxiety to high anxiety. Yeah. These two outliers are actually quite hard to affect purely through digital mental health. You kind of need other therapies, you need other support systems. So we're not necessarily looking at those focuses. We're looking at the largest group of people who are dealing with mild to high anxiety, not extreme or none. So primarily we're looking at those groups because those are the groups we know we can help. So we're trying to be quite frank about the fact that we're not a one-stop shop. No one solution is going to solve all of your problems, and we can't help everyone in the same way. So our focus is how do we help the most people in the most meaningful way.
So you are very, very focused on a specific group of audience. You have the research, you have the data, you have the product, so everything I see, whatever you have explained, is like a dream for angel investors, or if you're in the VC, are you guys raising fund or not right now?
So we are just starting to think about that. We have
Okay.
not tried raising funds yet, but we are we're in that phase where we're just going to get as much external output as possible. We're value testing our idea with our users.
Yeah.
Anybody who's has an open mind to talk to us, we're happy to talk to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But once we feel pretty good about that, we'd be very interested in raising.
Because you have it all. Because a lot of people, the idea is so broad. It sounds good on paper.
Yeah.
It looks good, but it's not executable with the amount of money they're raising. You always need to go. But you have a very specific plan, very specific path. Wow, to get there. Now, so I think this would be very, very appealing to any investors. I'm not pitching. Hopefully they watch the video like, oh, wow, was he part of the deal?
Exactly.
Is he getting a cut out of it? Why is he so excited? Oh, what happened here?
It's always good to see excitement.
Yes, yeah. That's the only part I can provide. I'm not contributing other than the excitement, but I'm very convinced, and I'm gonna start using it. I'm gonna start seeing, because the thing is with me, as I was saying, you have to see some result.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning days for lifting and all that, you don't see results for a long time. But at the same time, you are very sore.
Yeah,
so something worked. Something happened.
There is that feedback of pain.
So
it's a powerful motivator.
Yes, that is correct. And in this case, I will have the graph that's, I can kind of go through the journal, like, okay, this improved. Is it helping?
Yeah.
Was Jerry Seinfeld correct? Or he was just saying, So that's a good motivator. So, I like that. Now, this entrepreneurship world, and so far you're diving in every single day, you're working full time into these projects, putting all your effort, all your energy. What's your overall idea? Do you recommend it to others, or you say, hey, don't do entrepreneurship or anything?
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting challenge, and again, it's the blanket answers are always difficult.
Yeah.
I just think, for me, it was the right time and the right space and the right group of people and the right idea. Like, all that took time. Like, and I needed to set my life up to be able to have the time to achieve that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, if I had to buckle like a year ago or 2 years ago, if I only had a very limited time to do that, I think it would have been quite difficult. It needed the time to be able to mature into something. I do think it's quite challenging. I think it is. There are good days and there are bad days, obviously. And the bad days can be quite difficult because there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of doubt in the ecosystem around you because you're always working on something that's potentially abstract, potentially, and it's not an obvious solution. It's not an obvious, like, obviously this will make money right away. There's your own self-doubt about that, but then when you feel that self-doubt, that permeates. And everyone wants to be supportive. Obviously, everyone wants to be supportive, but not everyone necessarily is bound to the idea or committed to the idea or recognize it. So I think it's a hard life. It takes time. I think it takes a fair amount of support. So you have to have people around you who you can feel that support from, because I don't think you can do it by yourself. I think this idea of building everything just from the ground up through your own sheer will is quite hard. It's not for me.
It's impossible.
But yeah, so having a good team helps. Having personal connections, like your family, whoever it is around you who really support this notion, I think is pivotal. I don't think you can do this without that. I think it becomes untenable, honestly.
Wow. So you always had that entrepreneurial bug in you, or?
I've always knew I wanted to do something for myself. That has been a drive for the longest time. So it has been. It didn't occur. It was a long-term thought that I do want to build something for myself. It was unclear what that would be because I've done so many things, but this is where I am.
Yeah, because it was in the back of your mind, but then the journey took you there, through different paths and different experiences and the different people that you met. So that's very interesting to think about, because a lot of times I see the biggest problem that happens to entrepreneurs, sometimes it's fashionable. and people want to be entrepreneurs as a fashionable thing, right? Straight out of college, dropping out, things like that. I worked for many years. I ran businesses for many years. I still think it's hard. I'm like every single day is a challenge, Even if you have done it many times, there's a newer problem every time, right? And the only way to stop that is to stop it all. That's that's that part of it. And people who have worked for years, they kind of understand that. So when they come to the entrepreneurship world or start something on their own, they have an understanding that the world is not always sweet to you.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not.
And that's something, in our world, we don't go ahead and tell people to discourage, because that kind of sounds a bit of discouragement. Is he discouraging me to be an entrepreneur? But that's the harsh reality that people face, right? It just happens. But, you have taken some time off to go traveling around the world. What was that all about?
My wife and I love to travel in general, so we try and make sure we do that as frequently as possible. So our last major travel was for Bobby, our partner's wedding, so we were in Turkey for a couple of weeks. But we travel as often as we possibly can, just because I think ideas can get quite stale, routines can get quite stale. Like the brain can start to fog out over a little bit, and I think you need new perspectives. So we travel as often as possible, essentially.
And that's needed for the creatives.
I think it's true for everyone. Any kind of travel. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be exotic. Any kind of travel, just getting out of your own groove, I think is very helpful. I recognized this when I lived in New York for the longest time. To me, New York is the city best experience when it's left often. Because it takes quite a bit to to thrive, let alone or survive at the very least in New York. So I think it's best when you step away and you recognize what you have, and you're grateful for what you have. Otherwise, you kind of get into this rhythm of how do I deal with every day. So I do think it's quite important.
Man, so many things that you gave us, so many things to unpack. I loved it. I loved it. Anything else you want to share with us, with your audience, with the people that are downloading the app, the Ohms? So how do they download? So they go to the App Store, they type up Ohms. That's it?
Yeah. So we're only on the iOS store now. So we're not on Android yet. It's on the horizon.
Okay, so just iOS. So you're focusing on the iPhone people.
Currently, yes.
That's quite a bit of pretty wealthy people there. So they would be happily paying subscription. Is there a subscription?
We're free now.
It's free.
It's fully free.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We're building out other things. We don't know what that's necessarily what we're gonna to price or do any of that for. But right now we're focused on fully free.
Fully free. So why is it called ohms? What is that? Is it that unit of resistance in physics?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a play. It took a long time to figure out a name for the company, but it's a bit of play. So ohm is in classic Indian mythology. Ohm is the universal sound of resonance. So it's theoretically the sound that every object resonates with. But it's also, because we're doing breathwork and resistance, it's ohms as the unit of resistance. So that's how those two paired together to create ohms.
Ohms, yeah. Now that I'm thinking, I would kind of say. So folks, go to that's App Store on your phone, and then type up Ohms, OHMS.
Correct.
And boom, you got the breath app, and then you can start meditation, you can start journaling, and breathing exercises, things like that, and validate the ideas, and so. If you download it, it's for your own benefit. They're not actually trying to help you. They're just trying to help themselves in their daily life.
Hopefully, yeah.
Right?
Hopefully, yeah.
It's not. But so wow, this is amazing. So I love that. Now, any last word for you, for the visitors, for any of the users, investors, anybody you want to share?
The only thing that I would say is, if you use it, if you've let us know what you think. Let us know. Really, we're at that point where how many people are responding positively, and what can make this better for them. That's all we really care about right now. So let us know what you think. Feel free. Good, bad, it's okay. We want to hear all of it.
Yeah. Wow, man, I love it. Thank you, Sushir. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, download the app, give us feedback, and we want to see Sushir back again when he has some more updates and things like that. Happy. And after I use it, I'll also give him feedback.
Definitely.
How it's working. Thank you, and folks, please do subscribe.